Hey, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to address the question, should I differentiate my literacy centers? Then I'm also going to talk about how exactly to do that if you do choose to differentiate your literacy centers. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, go ahead and do that now, and then also hit the little bell so that you're notified every time I post a brand new video about teaching literacy in K2. Okay, so first I want to establish that when I'm saying literacy centers, I just mean any type of independent literacy activity that kids are working on, typically while you pull your small groups. And you want the work that they're doing to be meaningful, right? You don't want it to be boring to the point where they just don't want to do it. You don't want it to be so hard that they can't do it. You don't want it to be so easy that they're not learning anything or really practicing and growing. So it can be tough to figure out what kind of work to give kids that will occupy them, engage them, and allow you to pull small groups at the same time. We know as teachers that our kids are going to have different needs. And so when it comes to them doing independent activities, some activities that you might give to certain kids are perfect for them. But those same activities are way too hard, are way too easy for another group of students. So this is where it becomes complicated, right? When we differentiate our literacy centers, we can give activities that are more appropriate to different groups of students, but we also have to balance that with the restraints of time, right? And the fact that most of us, like as classroom teachers, we have quite a few kids in our class. So my answer to this question of should we differentiate literacy centers is yes, sometimes, and in certain ways. So it's not just a blanket like, yes, you have to make everything differentiated. I know firsthand that you just don't have time for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest some ways that, number one, you can create centers that don't have to be differentiated. And number two, some specific ideas for how you can use the same core activity, but easily differentiate to meet the needs of different groups of students. Okay, so first let's talk about centers that really don't have to be differentiated. One of these is a writing center. Now, when you give kids something to write about, some kids can draw, some kids can draw and label, some kids can write a sentence, some kids can write more sentences. And so when you do a writing center like this, as long as you show them the ways that they can respond, then it really kind of leaves it open-ended to what they can do. Another center that doesn't even need to be differentiated typically is a listening center. So if you use a free tool like Epic, you can go to getepic.com and sign up for that. At the time that I'm recording this, it is free. And you can have kids listen to books. And so having them listen to books and maybe even sometimes take little quizzes, write or draw about what they listen to is so good for building listening comprehension, especially in the younger grades. You know, you have kids that can't read texts that are very complex because they're just learning how to decode. And so when you read aloud to them or when they are at a listening center, they get an opportunity to be exposed to those more complex ideas, more challenging vocabulary words, and also background knowledge. It plays a huge role in comprehension. So if you have them listen to, it could be stories, but definitely nonfiction too, they're building their background knowledge and they are building the skills that they need to eventually comprehend. So listening center, very valuable, doesn't need to be differentiated. Okay, so those are a couple of examples of centers that don't have to be differentiated. Now, at this point, you can decide are my kids more or less on the same level, or do I need to differentiate some of the other work that they're doing in literacy centers? And I would love to hear from you in a comment. Let me know, whether it's this year or past years if you've been teaching for a while. Do you feel like you usually have a big range of abilities in your classroom, or you feel like you need to differentiate literacy centers, or do you feel like everybody's more or less on the same page and you don't have to differentiate literacy centers? Because honestly, it does depend and it might vary by year. But now let's get into some different activities that you can easily differentiate where you have one core activity and different versions of it. So all kids can basically do the same thing, but they're working on different skills. One type of activity that creates a great opportunity for differentiation is phonics games. So, you may have some kids, for example, that are working on vowel teams, and you may have some other kids who in small group are still working on short vowels. And so rather than try to force them to play the same game with the same words, you can have the same game, different versions, and maybe you have different colored folders for each group that they pull from. So this game, it's a card game, and you would have to cut these out. It's the Cracked Egg. It's a version of Old Maid. And essentially the the details of how to play it are irrelevant right now, but the kids are reading, in this case, words that have vowel teams EE and EA. Okay, so that's what they're practicing. And this would be something that you already taught and you're just reinforcing with this game. Now, you can have a totally separate set of the cracked egg game, but you could have short vowels. Maybe you have some kids that aren't reading at all yet, and so you cut apart these cards and they have pictures, and they are supposed to say the ending sound. So like bib, the ending sound is b, right? So there's different ways of having them play the same game, but they're doing it with different skills. Here's another example of a really simple game or activity that you can have even like kindergartners play. And I mean, really any grade can do this, but this is like, so it's roll and cover, and very simple. You can give them counting bears, you can give them counters, you can whatever, any kind of, little manipulative, and they roll the die. So if they roll a 1, it's like a bat, and they have to find a picture that starts with the same beginning sound as bat, right? So this is one version of the game. This is focusing on phonemic awareness, specifically isolating sounds. Now, some of your kids, they can play it great, but some of your kids might actually be ready to be finding a letter that begins with that sound. So instead of like finding a bat that begins, instead of finding a picture that begins with the same sound as bat, they're actually covering the letter B, okay? Same game, different versions. You can meet the different needs of kids. Next, let's move on to some ideas for what you might consider a reading center or a fluency center. And what I've got here these are actually from our literacy club materials. Everything I've been showing you is from the literacy clubs, by the way, so I will include a link for the literacy clubs in the caption of this video. But anyway, they're phonics and fluency passages, and this set is for CPC words, and this passage is for contractions, actually. So 2 different skills, right? And you can have the kids read these independently. There's also like some word work and comprehension activities they can do with those passages. But also one option is to have them read these passages with you in small group. And then the passages go into like an independent work folder. And during independent work time, they take the passage out, they read it again. And ours have like some little fluency activities and other accompanying things that they can do with the passage. Okay, so they're all doing, again, the same activity, but they're working on different passages and therefore different skills. One last type of activity I want to mention is for a writing center. And I already talked about how an independent writing center can be self-differentiating and you don't necessarily have to do anything. However, here are just some ideas that can support your kids if you want to push them a little bit or give them a little bit of extra help. So this particular writing theme was like weather and meteorology. What does a meteorologist do? And so inside the Literacy Club, we always give you differentiated materials. And this one is use this page, which you would have read aloud to the kids, to write 2 facts about a meteorologist. So they're writing 2 facts. They've actually got sentence starters. We have versions with and without, and then a word bank to help them with some of these words. We also have a version that's just plain, right? So you can see, and we have a couple of other versions too. You can see how you can provide different tools and supports to help your kids be successful with writing. When I first started the literacy clubs back in early 2019, one of my big goals was to be able to give you differentiated literacy centers. Because the reality is, yes, you're going to have kids in your classroom that are on, all ranges, right? Like all ranges of skills. But you as the teacher, you don't have time to create all of this stuff at all these different levels. And so what you get as a literacy club member, every single month you get tons of differentiated literacy centers where you have one core activity at different levels. So it is a huge time saver, a sanity saver, and you can feel so good because you are differentiating to meet kids' needs. I will include more information about the literacy clubs in the caption of this video. They only open up a couple times a year, but you can always get on the wait list. And by the way, waitlist members actually get a free center every single month. So hop on that wait list right now, go for the link in the caption. And I hope this video was helpful to you in thinking about if and how you might differentiate your literacy centers. Don't forget to hit the like button before you go, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.